The transport ship Harmony's Edge floated in the darkness between stars. Its metal hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers from nose to tail. Lights blinked along its surface like scattered jewels. Inside the ship, dozens of different alien species worked together, or at least they tried to work together. Lieutenant Kim So-young stepped through the airlock with her single travel bag slung over her shoulder. The gravity felt different here. Lighter than Earth normal, but heavier than the moon colonies where she had trained. Her boots made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor as she walked down the corridor. The walls around her hummed with alien technology. Strange symbols glowed on panels that she could not read. The air smelled like ozone and something sweet that reminded her of flowers. But underneath those scents was something else. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She was not welcome here. 2 aliens stood waiting for her at the end of the corridor. The first was tall and thin like a reed. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to glow with its own light. Long fingers ended in sharp points. Its eyes were large and completely black. This was Captain Velthari of the Etherian species. The second alien was shorter but much wider. Thick gray armor covered its body from head to toe. Steam came out of vents in its shoulders. Red lights glowed where its eyes should be. This was First Officer Grixeval, a Korthak warrior. Captain Velthari looked down at So-young. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But there was no gentleness in its words. "So you are the human they sent us," the captain said. "How disappointing." So-young stood straight and gave a proper military salute. "Lieutenant Kim So-young reporting for duty, Captain. I am honored to serve aboard your ship." First Officer Grixeval made a sound that might have been laughter. When it spoke, its voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "Honored to serve. How quaint. Tell me, human, what exactly can your species do that we cannot do better?" So-young kept her face calm. She had expected this. The briefings on Earth had warned her that most alien species looked down on humans. They saw humans as new to space, travel, primitive, weak. She had hoped it would be different on a diplomatic ship, but she was wrong. "I have training in tactical analysis and sensor operations," she said. "My service record shows success in deep space reconnaissance and threat assessment." Captain Velthari waved one long finger in the air. "Threat assessment. Yes, we read your file. You see dangers that do not exist. Very human." The captain turned to the first officer. "Grixeval, show our guest to her station." The armored alien gestured for So-young to follow. They walked through corridors lined with busy crew members. She saw species she recognized from her training. The tall, gray Zentaurians with their multiple arms. The small, quick Pixians that moved like hummingbirds. The plant-like Verdians with leaves instead of hair. All of them stopped their work to stare at her as she passed. Some whispered to each other in languages she did not understand. Others just watched with what looked like curiosity or amusement. None of them looked at her with respect. They passed the bridge where the ship's main operations took place. Through the open doors, So-young could see banks of computers and holographic displays. Officers of different species worked at control stations. The room buzzed with important activity. They walked past engineering where massive machines hummed with power. Past the weapons control center where tactical officers monitored space around the ship. Past the communications hub where signals from across the galaxy flowed in and out. They kept walking. "Where exactly is my station?" So-young asked. "You will see," Grixeval replied. They reached the back of the ship. The corridors here were narrower. The lights were dimmer. Fewer crew members walked these halls. The first officer stopped at a door, marked with symbols So-young could not read. "This is where humans belong," Grixeval said. The door slid open. The room beyond was small and cramped. A single chair sat in front of a simple computer terminal. One small window looked out into empty space. Along the walls were basic sensor displays and monitoring equipment. Everything looked old and worn compared to what she had seen in the main sections of the ship. "The rear observation deck," the first officer explained. "You will monitor deep space sensors from here. Watch for asteroids, space debris, things that might scratch our paint. So Jung stepped into the room and looked around. It was barely large enough for one person. The air recycling system made odd rattling sounds. The floor had scuff marks from years of use by whoever had been stuck here before her. "This is my station?" she asked. "This is appropriate for your species' limited capabilities," Captain Velthari said from behind her. The captain had followed them to see So-Young's reaction. "Human technology is simple. Human understanding is basic. This equipment matches your level." Other crew members had gathered in the corridor to watch. So-Young heard quiet laughter and whispered comments. She recognized a few words in galactic common: primitive, weak, useless. She set down her travel bag and sat in the chair. The computer terminal came to life when she touched it. The displays were indeed simple compared to what she had trained on, but they would work for what she needed to do. "I understand, Captain," she said. "When do I begin my duties?" Captain Velthari seemed surprised by her calm response. "You may begin immediately. Try not to break anything important." More laughter came from the corridor. The captain and first officer left with the other crew members. Soon So-Young was alone in her small room at the back of the ship. She looked out the window at the stars. They were beautiful out here between worlds, clean and bright against the black of space. She had always loved looking at stars, even as a child on Earth. They reminded her that the universe was vast and full of wonders. But they also reminded her that it was full of dangers. So-Young began setting up her equipment. She connected her personal gear to the ship's sensors. She ran diagnostic tests on all the monitoring systems. She studied the ship's layout and learned where every important system was located. The aliens had put her in the back because they thought she was harmless. They thought she was too primitive to be useful anywhere else. They were wrong about many things, but they were especially wrong about what it meant to be harmless. 3 days passed since So-Young had taken her position at the rear of the ship. She fell into a routine that the alien crew found boring and pointless. Every morning she checked her sensors. Every afternoon she ran system diagnostics. Every evening, she filed reports that no one bothered to read. The other crew members had already forgotten about her. They went about their important work on the bridge and in the main sections. Sometimes they made jokes about the humans sitting alone in the back. The jokes were never kind, but So-Young did not mind being forgotten. It gave her time to learn things that the aliens did not expect her to understand. She studied the ship's computer systems. She mapped every corridor and every room. She learned the daily schedules of every crew member. Most importantly, she watched space. On the 3rd day, her sensors began picking up strange readings. At first they were small, tiny blips on her screens that appeared and disappeared. The ship's main computers labeled them as background radiation or sensor errors. Nothing to worry about. So-Young knew better. She had grown up hunting deer in the mountains of Korea with her grandfather. The old man had taught her to read signs that others missed. A broken twig here, a disturbed leaf there. The way birds suddenly stopped singing in one area. These sensor readings reminded her of those hunting trips. They looked random to anyone else. But there was a pattern hidden underneath. Something was moving out there in the darkness between stars. Something big. Something that did not want to be seen. The readings came from a region of space that star charts called the void sector. Most ships avoided this area. It was known for strange things that could not be explained. Spaces where the laws of physics seemed to work differently. Places where ships sometimes disappeared without sending distress calls. Captain Velthari had chosen to cut through the void sector to save time getting to the diplomatic summit. The captain was proud of this decision. It would show the other species that Etherians were brave and efficient. So-Young studied the readings more carefully. She used her personal equipment to filter out background noise. Slowly, a clearer picture began to form. The blips were not random at all. They moved in coordination like a pack of wolves surrounding prey. She opened a communication channel to the bridge. "Bridge, this is rear observation," she said. "I am detecting unusual movement patterns in the void sector, multiple contacts approaching, from different vectors." The response came from a junior officer. His voice was bored and dismissive. We show nothing on main sensors. Are you sure your equipment is working properly? My equipment is functioning normally, So-Young replied. The contacts appear to be using some kind of stealth technology. They are difficult to detect, but they are definitely there. She heard laughter in the background. Someone said something about humans seeing monsters in shadows. Stand by, the junior officer said. A few minutes later, First Officer Grixvol's voice came over the channel. Human, report to the bridge immediately. So-Young saved her sensor data and walked through the ship to the bridge. Crew members stared at her as she passed. Word had already spread that the human was causing trouble with false alarms. The bridge was busy with activity. Captain Velthari stood at the center near a large holographic display showing the space around the ship. The display showed empty, void in all directions. You requested to speak with us, the captain said without looking at So-Young. Yes, Captain. My sensors are detecting multiple contacts in the void sector. They appear to be following coordinated movement patterns that suggest intelligence and hostile intent. First Officer Grixvol pointed at the main display. As you can see, there is nothing there. Our sensors are far more advanced than your primitive equipment. If there were threats in this area, we would detect them. Captain, with respect, I believe something is masking their presence from your main sensors. My equipment uses different detection methods that may be picking up traces they cannot hide completely. Captain Velthari finally turned to look at her. Those large black eyes showed no emotion. Tell me, human, what do you think these mysterious contacts are? So-Young had been hoping they would not ask that question. She had spent hours researching what she was seeing. The answer frightened her more than she wanted to admit. Based on the movement patterns and the way they avoid direct detection, I believe they may be void hunters. Silence fell over the bridge. Every crew member stopped what they were doing and stared at her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then First Officer Grixvol began laughing. It was a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. Soon other crew members joined in. Void hunters, the first officer said between laughs. The human thinks she has found the monsters from children's stories. Captain Velthari's expression did not change. Void hunters are legends, stories told to frighten young ones. They do not exist. Captain, the legends had to come from somewhere, So-Young said. Perhaps they are based on real encounters with these entities. Enough, the captain said sharply. You are letting your primitive fear responses cloud your judgment. Humans see threats where none exist because your species spent millions of years hiding from predators. This is exactly why we assigned you to simple monitoring duties. The captain turned back to the main display. Return to your station. Continue your duties and leave navigation to your betters. If you file any more false reports, you will be confined to quarters for the remainder of the journey. So-Young wanted to argue. She wanted to show them the sensor data she had collected. She wanted to make them understand that something dangerous was stalking their ship through the void, but she could see in their eyes that it would be pointless. They had already decided that humans were primitive and fearful. Nothing she said would change their minds. Yes, Captain, she said. She walked back through the ship to her small station at the rear. Crew members whispered and pointed at her as she passed. The human who saw monsters in empty space. The primitive who could not tell the difference between sensor ghosts and real threats. So-Young sat down at her station and looked at her displays. The readings were still there, still moving in those coordinated patterns that reminded her of pack hunters surrounding prey. The aliens could dismiss her warnings. They could laugh at her fears, but she would keep watching. She would keep tracking whatever was out there in the darkness, because her grandfather had taught her something that the advanced alien species had apparently forgotten. Sometimes the monsters from stories turn out to be real, and when they come hunting, it is better to be ready than sorry. The attack came without warning. So-Young was at her station reviewing sensor logs from the past 6 hours when the first impact shook the ship. The lights flickered. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the corridors. Her coffee cup fell from her desk and shattered on the floor. All hands to battle stations. Captain Velthari's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Unknown hostiles. So-Young almost laughed despite the danger. She had tried to warn them. She had shown them the sensor readings. They had dismissed her as a primitive human seeing monsters in shadows. Now, the monsters had arrived. Through her small window, So-young could see flashes of light in the darkness around the ship. But these were not normal weapon discharges. The light seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at. Reality itself appeared to be warping around the attackers. Her sensors were going crazy. The displays showed impossible readings. Objects that existed and did not exist at the same time. Energy signatures that violated the basic laws of physics. Movement that happened faster than light, but also seemed to move backward through time. The Void Hunters had revealed themselves. Another impact struck the ship, this one much stronger. So-young was thrown from her chair as the rear section twisted like a piece of metal being bent by invisible hands. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. The air recycling system made a grinding sound and went silent. She pulled herself back, to her feet, and checked her equipment. Most of her sensors were still working. Unlike the main systems of the ship, her simple human technology was not sophisticated enough to be confused by the impossible physics of their attackers. The ship's communication system crackled with panicked voices from the bridge. "Shields are failing," someone shouted. "The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Weapon systems are not responding," another voice reported. "Our targeting computers cannot lock onto the hostiles. They are phasing in and out of normal space," a third voice added. "How do we fight enemies that do not fully exist in our reality?" So-young listened to the chaos and fear in those voices. These were the same aliens who had mocked her warnings. The same ones who thought their advanced technology made them superior to primitive humans. Their advanced technology was failing them now. She switched her sensors to passive mode and began tracking the attackers by the disturbance they created. In space around the ship, the Void Hunters moved like sharks circling wounded prey. They struck at the ship's most important systems first, the main engines, the primary weapons, the shield generators. They were not attacking randomly. They knew exactly what they were doing. A new voice came over the communication system. First Officer Grixval sounded afraid for the first time since So-young had met him. "Hull breach on Deck 7, he reported. "Something is cutting through our armor like it was made of paper. The breach is spreading, but there is nothing there. Our security teams cannot find any physical intruders." So-young understood what was happening. The Void Hunters could exist partially outside normal space. They could reach inside the ship without actually being inside it. They could attack from directions that did not exist in normal physics. Another massive impact shook the ship. This time she heard something that made her blood run cold. Screaming. Not just screams of fear or pain, but screams of minds that had seen something they could not understand. The screaming stopped suddenly. Then First Officer Grixval's voice came back over the communication system. But he sounded different now. Smaller. Broken. "Medical emergency on the bridge," he said quietly. "Captain Velthari is down. Communications Officer Zien is dead." Something reached inside her mind and pulled it apart from the inside. So-young closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had read about Void Hunters in the oldest archives on Earth. Stories brought back by the few humans who had encountered them and lived to tell about it. The creatures did not just kill their prey. They fed on consciousness itself. They turned minds inside out and consumed the fear and pain they found there. The ship shuddered again. Through her window she could see more of those impossible flashes of twisted light. The Void Hunters were taking their time now, playing with their food before they ate it. "All crew to emergency evacuation stations," Grixval's voice echoed through the ship. "Prepare to abandon ship. This is not a drill." But So-young knew there would be no evacuation. The Void Hunters would not let their prey escape so easily. The lifeboats would be destroyed before they could reach safe distance. Everyone aboard would die screaming in the void, unless someone did something about it. She looked around her small station at the back of the ship. The aliens had put her here because they thought she was harmless. They thought this was the safest place to keep the primitive human out of the way. They had no idea what they had just done. So-young began pulling up ship schematics on her computer. She studied the layout of every corridor and every system. She traced power conduits and data lines. She mapped escape routes and choke points. The Void Hunters were apex predators. They had evolved to hunt the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They knew how to counter sophisticated technology and complex strategies, but they had never encountered a human who had been relegated to the back of the ship and forgotten about. They had never faced a predator that their victims had underestimated. Another scream echoed through the communication system. Then another. The Void Hunters were working their way through the ship's crew one by one, taking their time, enjoying the hunt. So-young stood up and walked to a supply locker. Inside were basic tools and emergency equipment. Nothing fancy or high-tech. Just simple human engineering that would work even when the impossible was happening around it. She began gathering what she would need. The aliens had called her primitive. They had laughed at her fears. They had put her in the back where she could not interfere with their important work. Now she was going to show them exactly why her species had survived everything Earth could throw at them. She was going to hunt the hunters. So-young moved through the darkened corridors of the ship like a ghost. The main lighting had failed after the third major attack. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. The air smelled of burnt metal and something else. Something that reminded her of rotting flowers. She carried a simple toolkit and a portable sensor unit. Nothing advanced or complicated. Just basic human technology that the Void Hunters would not expect or understand. The screaming had stopped 20 minutes ago. Now the ship was quiet except for the groaning of damaged metal and the occasional spark from broken systems. Most of the crew was dead. The survivors were hiding in sealed compartments, too frightened to move. So-young was not hiding. She reached the first intersection and stopped. Her portable sensor showed traces of something that should not exist. Energy patterns that folded, back on themselves. Matter that existed in multiple states at the same time. A Void Hunter had passed through here recently. She studied the readings carefully. Her grandfather had taught her to track wounded deer through thick forest by following traces that city people would never notice. A drop of blood on a leaf. A disturbed patch of moss. The smell of fear in the wind. Tracking interdimensional predators was not so different. The Void Hunter had moved toward the main engineering section. It was hunting survivors who had locked themselves in the reactor control room. The thick shielding around the reactor made them think they were safe. They were wrong. So-young followed the trail. She moved slowly and quietly, staying close to them. Walls. Her human vision had adapted to the dim red light better than most alien eyes would. Another advantage that her species had gained from millions of years of evolution. She found the engineering section torn apart. Massive holes had been carved through bulkheads that were designed to contain reactor explosions. But the cuts were perfectly smooth, as if reality itself had been sliced away. Through one of the holes she could see the reactor control room. 5 survivors huddled inside around the main control console. 3 Zentaurians with their gray skin and multiple arms. 1 small Pixian that looked like a frightened bird. 1 Verdian whose leaf-like hair had turned brown with fear. They had sealed the door and activated emergency shields. They thought the thick armor would protect them from whatever was hunting the ship. Above them, something impossible was taking shape. The Void Hunter materialized slowly like ink spreading through water. It had no fixed form that So-young could understand. Sometimes it looked like a massive spider made of shadow and starlight. Sometimes it appeared to be a cloud of darkness with too many eyes. Sometimes it seemed to be a hole in space itself that moved with predatory intelligence. The survivors in the control room had not seen it yet. They were focused on their instruments, trying to restore power to the ship's engines. They did not know that death was forming right above their heads. So-young had 2 choices. She could try to warn them, but that would alert the Void Hunter to her presence. Or she could let them die while she gathered information about how these creatures hunted. Her grandfather would have called this a teaching moment. Sometimes you had to watch the predator kill to understand how to kill it in return. But these were her crewmates. Even if they had treated her badly, she could not just watch them die. She activated her portable sensor and aimed it at the Void Hunter. The readings were incredible. The creature existed in at least 7 different dimensions at the same time. It drew energy from the fear and pain of its victims. And most importantly, It had physical anchor points that kept it stable, in normal space. Those anchor points could be targeted. So-young pulled a cutting torch from her toolkit. It was a simple tool designed for emergency repairs. Nothing fancy, just concentrated heat that could cut through metal. She aimed carefully at what her sensors showed as the creature's primary anchor point and fired. The Void Hunter's scream was like the sound of reality tearing. It spun toward her with impossible speed, its form shifting and changing as it moved. The survivors in the control room finally saw it and began screaming themselves. But the creature was hurt. Her simple human tool had damaged something that advanced alien weapons could not touch. The Void Hunter lunged at her through the hole in the bulkhead. So-young rolled aside as claws made of crystallized void slashed through the space where she had been standing. The metal floor melted where the claws touched it. She came up running. Behind her, the creature gave chase, its form flowing through the corridors like liquid nightmare. It was fast, but So-young had something it did not expect. Endurance. Her human body had been shaped by millions of years of persistence hunting. Her ancestors had run down prey across vast distances, never giving up, never stopping. Other predators were faster or stronger, but humans could keep going when everything else collapsed from exhaustion. She led the Void Hunter on a chase through the ship's lower levels, up emergency ladders and down maintenance shafts, through cargo bays and storage compartments, always staying just ahead of its grasping claws, and while she ran, she learned. The creature was fast in short bursts, but had trouble maintaining its form over long distances. It needed to feed on fear to stay solid in normal space. When it got angry, it made mistakes. After 15 minutes of running, the Void Hunter was beginning to fade. Its attacks were becoming less precise. It was getting frustrated that this small human prey would not simply stop and die like the others. So-young led it into the main cargo bay. This was where she had been planning to make her stand. She had spent 3 days mapping this ship. She knew every system and every weakness. The cargo bay had something the rest of the ship did not. Electromagnetic containment fields designed to hold dangerous materials during transport. As the Void Hunter flowed into the bay after her, So-young activated the containment system with her portable control unit. The field snapped on, creating a cage of pure energy around the creature. The Void Hunter struck the barriers and screamed again. But this time it could not escape. The electromagnetic fields interfered with its ability to phase between dimensions. So-young walked calmly to the cargo bay controls. She began charging the containment fields to maximum power. The creature thrashed and writhed inside its prison, its form becoming more unstable with each passing second. "You hunt by fear," she said to the creature. "You feed on terror and pain, but I am not afraid of you." She pressed the final control button. The containment fields collapsed inward, crushing the Void Hunter into a single point of space. There was a flash of impossible light, and then nothing. One down. So-young checked her sensors. The reading showed at least 3 more Void Hunters, somewhere in the ship. They would have felt their companion die. They would come looking for whoever had killed it. She smiled and began walking toward the next set of readings. Let them come. She was just getting started. 3 hours later, the ship was quiet again. But this time it was a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of death, but the silence of a predator that had finished hunting. So-young stood in the remains of what had once been the main dining hall. Twisted metal and melted deck plating surrounded her. Strange burns marked the walls where reality itself had been damaged during her fight with the third Void Hunter. She was tired but not exhausted. Her clothes were torn and she had several cuts on her arms from the creature's claws. But she was alive. More importantly, the things that had been hunting her ship were not. The last Void Hunter had been the smartest. It had tried to ambush her by possessing one of the surviving crew members. For a few terrible minutes, she had been forced to fight against Jin Seola, a young Etherian navigator who had always been kind to her. That fight had been the hardest, not because of the creature's power, but because she had to find a way to destroy it without killing the innocent person it was using as a puppet. She had managed it by using the ship's medical scanners to map exactly where the Void Hunter was attached to Ciola's nervous system. Then she used a surgical laser to cut only those connections, freeing the navigator while destroying the creature. It was precise work that required steady hands and perfect timing, the kind of work that her human ancestors had done when they hunted mammoths with nothing but stone spears and endless patience. Now she walked through the ship looking for survivors. Her portable sensor unit showed life signs in several sections. Crew members who had hidden in secure compartments and storage areas. They were alive, but too frightened to come out. She found the first group in a maintenance bay near the ship's center. 5 aliens huddled together behind a barricaded door. When she knocked and identified herself, they opened the door slowly. First Officer Grixval was among them. His armor was cracked and several of his red lights had gone out. He stared at her with what might have been disbelief. "Lieutenant Kim," he said, "you are alive." "Yes, sir." "The immediate threat has been eliminated. The ship is secure." Behind the first officer, she could see the others. 2 Korthak engineers, 1 Zentaurian communications specialist, 1 Pixian pilot whose wings were folded tight against her back. "In fear." "Eliminated," Grixval repeated. "What do you mean, eliminated?" "The Void Hunters are dead, sir. All 4 of them." The silence that followed was complete. The alien stared at her like she had just claimed to have stopped time or reversed gravity. "That is impossible," the Zentaurian said. "Those creatures destroyed our most advanced weapons. They tore through our shields like they were made of paper. How could you have killed them?" So-Young considered how to answer that question. How could she explain to these advanced beings that their technology had been their weakness? That their sophisticated systems had been too complex to fight enemies that existed outside normal physics? "I used simple tools and basic tactics," she said finally. "The Void Hunters were adapted to fight against advanced civilizations. They were not prepared for primitive human methods." She showed them her toolkit. The cutting torch that had wounded the first creature, the portable control unit she had used to trap the second one, the medical scanner and surgical laser that had separated the fourth one from its host. "These are maintenance tools," the Pixian pilot said. "How did maintenance tools destroy apex predators?" "Because they work on basic physical principles," So-Young explained. "Heat, electromagnetism, focused energy. The Void Hunters could phase around your quantum weapons and energy shields, but they could not phase around simple heat or basic electromagnetic fields." First Officer Grixval was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. It took her a moment to realize what it was. Respect. "You saved us," he said quietly. "All of us. We would be dead if not for you." "That is what crew members do for each other," So-Young replied. "We protect the pack." She helped them out of the maintenance bay and led them to other groups of survivors. Each group reacted the same way when they saw her. Disbelief followed by amazement followed by something approaching awe. They found Captain Velthari in the emergency medical bay. The captain was alive but barely conscious. The Void Hunter's mental attack had left lasting damage. When the captain saw So-Young, those large black eyes focused with difficulty. "Human," the captain whispered. "The creatures. Are they gone?" "Yes, Captain. They are gone." "How?" So-Young knelt beside the medical bed. "You asked me what my species was, Captain. I told you we were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but I did not tell you what we were." She paused, looking around at the surviving crew members who had gathered to listen. "We are survivors. We are the species that looked at a planet full of creatures bigger and stronger and faster than us, and we decided to hunt them anyway. We are persistence predators. We never give up. We never stop. And we protect our pack, no matter what tries to hurt them." Captain Velthari's eyes widened slightly. "Your pack? This crew is my pack now. You put me in the back because you thought I was harmless. You did not realize you were giving your ship's most dangerous hunter the perfect position to watch for threats." She stood up and looked around at all of them. These aliens who had mocked her and dismissed her and treated her like a primitive child. "You see threats where none exist," she said, repeating the captain's words from 3 days ago. "That is what you told me. But the truth is, You do not see threats until they are already killing you. That is why you needed someone like me. She walked to the medical bay's small window and looked out at the stars. Your technology is amazing. Your civilizations are beautiful. Your knowledge is vast. But you have forgotten something important. What have we forgotten? First Officer Grixvoll asked. So-young turned back to face them. You have forgotten that the universe is full of things that want to eat you. And when those things come hunting, you need someone who knows how to hunt them back. The medical bay was quiet for a long moment. Then Jin Seola, the young navigator whom So-young had saved from possession, spoke up. What happens now? She asked. So-young smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since boarding the ship 4 days ago. Now we fix the ship and continue to the diplomatic summit. And when we get there, maybe the galaxy will learn something new about humans. What will they learn? Captain Velthari asked. They will learn that we are not just another primitive species seeking acceptance. We are the apex predators that their apex predators have nightmares about. And we are very good at protecting the people we care about. 2 weeks later, So-young stood in the captain's ready room aboard the diplomatic station Proxima Prime. Through the large windows, she could see dozens of ships from across the galaxy. Each one carried representatives from different species coming together for the Galactic Council Summit. Admiral Chen Dabin, the human representative to the council, sat across from her at a polished metal desk. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, but those eyes had seen many battles during humanity's expansion into space. The official report makes for interesting reading, the Admiral said, tapping a data pad. One human tactical officer single-handedly eliminated 4 Void Hunters while saving 37 alien crew members. The Etherian and Korthak governments are calling it impossible. It was not impossible, sir, it was just unexpected. Admiral Chen smiled. Unexpected? That is a very human way of putting it. He leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Lieutenant, what did you learn during your time on that ship? So-young thought carefully before answering. I learned that advanced civilizations can become too dependent on their technology. When they face threats that their computers cannot understand, they become helpless. But I also learned that they are capable of changing their minds when presented with new evidence. And how did they treat you after the incident? Very differently, sir, that was an understatement. The surviving crew members of the Harmony's Edge had treated her like a hero for the rest of the journey. They asked her advice on everything from tactical decisions to personal problems. They wanted to understand how human thinking worked and how it could be applied to their own situations. Captain Velthari had recovered from the mental attack and had personally requested that So-young be assigned to the captain's senior staff. First Officer Grixvoll had asked for copies of all human military manuals to study. Jin Seola had started taking lessons in human languages and culture. The change had been remarkable and complete. I have been speaking with representatives from 12 different species, Admiral Chen continued. They all want to know the same thing. They want to know if there are more humans like you. Every human is like me, sir. We all carry the same basic instincts and abilities, the same survival skills that got our species through millions of years of evolution on Earth. That is what I told them. The Admiral stood and walked to the window. Outside, a massive Etherian cruiser was docking with the station. The Galactic Council is voting today on a new initiative. They want to create mixed crews for all deep space exploration and diplomatic missions. Mixed crews, sir? Ships with crews from multiple species, working together as equals, not as guests or observers, but as full partners. He turned back to face her. They want humans on every crew that ventures into dangerous areas of space. They are calling it the Apex Protocol. So-young felt a chill run down her spine. They want us to be their hunters. No, Lieutenant. They want you to be their protectors. There is a difference. Admiral Chen returned to his desk and picked up another data pad. The Void Hunters were not the only threat lurking in unexplored space. Our deep space sensors have detected signs of other entities, things that make the Void Hunters look like house pets. He showed her the sensor readings, strange energy patterns, moving through the darkness between galaxies. massive structures that appeared to be artificial, but were older than most known civilizations. The galaxy is waking up, Lieutenant. Ancient things are stirring. Things that have been sleeping for millions of years are beginning to hunt again. The civilized species need allies who understand what it means to face the unknown. So-young studied the readings. Her human instincts told her that these new threats would be far worse than anything they had encountered before. But they also told her something else. We can handle it, sir. I believe you can. The question is whether you want to. She looked out at the ships gathering around the station. Each one carried people who had once looked down on humanity as primitive and weak. Now they wanted human protection against the terrors that lurked in the darkness. It was ironic in a way that would have made her grandfather laugh. What would my assignment be? She asked. Commander of tactical operations for the entire galactic diplomatic fleet. 12 ships with mixed crews. Your job would be to keep them all safe while they explore the unknown regions of space. Commander. It was a significant promotion from lieutenant. More importantly, it was a chance to do what she had been born to do. Protect her pack from the things that wanted to hurt them. I accept, sir. Admiral Chen smiled and handed her a new set of rank insignia. Welcome to the big leagues, Commander. Your first assignment will be to train human tactical officers for placement on alien ships throughout the galaxy. As she pinned the new ranks to her uniform, So-young thought about the journey that had brought her here. 4 weeks ago, she had been assigned to the back of an alien ship because they thought she was harmless. Now she was being asked to lead the defense of an entire civilization. Sir, may I ask you something? Of course. Why do you think they finally understand what humans can do for them? Admiral Chen considered the question for a moment. Because they learned something important about our species. They learned that when you put a human in the back and tell them they are not important, they do not give up and go away. They watch and wait and learn. And when the monsters come hunting, they hunt the monsters back. He walked her to the door of the ready room. The galaxy spent a long time thinking that humans were just another weak species seeking protection. Now they know the truth. We are not the ones who need protection. We are the ones who provide it. As So-young left the ready room, she passed a group of young officers from different species. They were heading to a briefing room where human instructors would teach them about persistence hunting and pack defense tactics. The aliens who had once mocked human primitive instincts were now eager to learn those same instincts. She made her way to the observation deck where she could look out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, ancient terrors were beginning to stir. Things that had hunted and killed across the galaxy for millions of years were waking up hungry. But they had never faced anything like humanity before. So-young smiled as she thought about what was coming. The ancient predators awakening in the void would expect to face the same civilized species they had hunted before, species that relied on technology and logic and careful planning. They would not expect to face humans. They would not expect to face a species that had learned to hunt by running their prey to exhaustion across endless plains. A species that had survived ice ages and volcanic winters and mass extinctions by refusing to give up. A species that looked at bigger, stronger, more dangerous predators and decided to hunt them anyway. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to see Jin Seola, the young Etherian navigator from the Harmony's Edge. Seola was now wearing the uniform of a galactic fleet officer. Commander Kim, Seola said with a respectful bow. I wanted to thank you again for saving my life. You do not need to thank me, So-young replied. That is what pack members do for each other. Pack members? Seola repeated the words thoughtfully. I have been studying human social structures. This concept of pack loyalty is very important to your species. It is everything to us. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We hunt the things that threaten our pack. We never abandon our own. Seola nodded. I have requested assignment to your tactical fleet. I want to learn more about human methods. Why? The young Etherian looked out at the stars. Because after what happened on the ship, I understand something now. The galaxy is not as safe as we thought it was. There are things out there that our technology cannot fight. We need allies who think differently than we do. And you think humans think differently? I know you do. When the Void Hunters attacked, our response was to hide and hope our defenses would hold. Your response was to hunt them down and kill them one by one. That is not just different thinking. That is a completely different way of existing in the universe. So-young studied the young officer's face. There was something there that had not been present before the attack. A hardness around the eyes. An awareness of danger that came from facing real predators. You understand now that the universe wants to eat you, she said. Yes, and I understand that some species are better equipped to eat it back. They stood together looking out at the gathering fleet, ships from dozens of species working together for the first time as true equals. Each crew would have human tactical officers trained to think like persistence predators. Commander, Ciola said quietly. What do you think will happen when the ancient things wake up completely? So-young thought about her grandfather teaching her to track deer through the Korean mountains. She thought about the patience required to follow prey for days until it was too exhausted to run anymore. She thought about the moment when the roles reversed and the hunter became the hunted. I think they will discover something that they have never encountered before, she said. They will discover what it feels like to be prey in the distance. Alarms began sounding as another ship arrived at the station. This one was damaged, with scorch marks along its hull and strange energy readings emanating from its cargo bay. The survivors aboard had stories of something stirring in the deep void,